The great chamber of the Galactic Coalition fell silent as the holographic display showed another world dying. Velkesh watched with 4 of his 6 arms trembling as Kentar 5, a planet that had been home to 2 billion souls just 2 days ago, turned dark. The Ravager swarm had consumed everything. Every city, every forest, every ocean. Now it was just a gray ball of dead rock floating in space. 12 worlds, Commander Thulvek said. His crystalline body flickered with dark colors that showed his despair. 12 worlds in 3 months. Our fleets cannot stop them. Velkesh looked around the council chamber at the representatives from 40 different species. All of them looked scared. All of them knew the truth. The Ravagers were winning. The Ravagers were not like other enemies. They were not a nation or an empire. They were a swarm, a hive mind that existed only to consume and spread. They landed on a planet like locusts, ate everything living, then moved to the next world. Coalition scientists had studied them for years but found no way to communicate, no way to negotiate. The Ravagers only knew hunger. We must evacuate the core world, said one representative. A being made of flowing water held in a containment suit. Save who we can and go where? Thulvex's voice boomed through the chamber. They will follow. They always follow. Velkesh raised 2 of his arms for silence. As the Coalition's senior ambassador, he had to maintain hope even when he felt none. We have one option left. We send out a distress call on all frequencies. Every channel we know. Perhaps someone out there can help us. Who? Another counselor asked. We have contacted every civilized species in this part of the galaxy. Everyone who can fight is already fighting. Everyone who can't is running. Then we call to those we have not contacted, Velkesh said quietly. Even the ones in the forbidden zones. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. Everyone knew what he meant. There were parts of the galaxy that the Coalition had marked as too dangerous. Regions with Deathworlds, planets so hostile that they were labeled as forbidden. No civilized species lived in such places, or so they believed. We have no choice, Velkesh continued. Send the message everywhere. Let anyone who can hear it know that we are dying. The vote was quick. Desperation made them agree. Within an hour, the distress call went out across every frequency, in every language to every corner of known space and beyond. 3 days later and 8,000 light-years away, Captain Daehyun sat in his monitoring station and drank his morning coffee. The station was small, just 5 people, orbiting a dead moon in a sector that the Coalition had marked with warnings. He had been here for 2 years and most days were boring. He listened to Coalition chatter, filed reports that nobody read, and waited for his tour to end. Captain, I'm picking up something strange, Dr. Haewon said from her workstation. She was the station's science officer and the closest thing Daehyun had to a friend out here. Strange how? Daehyun walked over, still holding his coffee. It's a wideband broadcast, Coalition frequencies, but it's marked as Priority Alpha. Haewon pulled up the translation. It's a distress call. Daehyun read the message and felt his blood go cold. The words were formal, diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. The Galactic Coalition was being destroyed by something called the Ravager Swarm. They had lost 12 worlds. Their military was broken. They were begging for help from anyone who could hear them. How bad is it? Haewon asked. Bad enough that they're broadcasting into quarantine zones, Daehyun said. They must be desperate if they're calling out to sectors they've marked as death worlds. Should we report this to Earth? Daehyun was quiet for a moment. For 70 years, humanity had stayed hidden from the Coalition. Earth's governments had decided that the galaxy wasn't ready to meet humans. The Coalition species were peaceful, yes, but fragile. They came from easy worlds with light gravity and stable climates. Their military doctrine was defensive. They had never faced a real predator species. Humans, on the other hand, came from Earth. A world the Coalition would classify as a nightmare. Heavy gravity, dangerous radiation, violent weather, aggressive diseases, and predators everywhere. Humanity had evolved by learning to hunt, to persist, to never give up. Earth had made them strong in ways the Coalition couldn't understand. Yes, Daehyun finally said. Send it all to Earth Command. Everything we have on the Ravagers, the Coalition's military capacity, and this distress call. Haewon began compiling the data. Do you think they'll respond? I don't know, Daehyun admitted. But if they do, the galaxy is about to learn that they're not alone out here. While Haewon worked, Daehyun pulled up the Coalition's public data on the Ravagers. What he saw made him angry. These creatures landed on peaceful worlds and killed billions. They didn't fight for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They consumed everything and moved on. Children, families, entire civilizations erased in days. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his sister, her kids. If the Ravagers kept spreading, eventually they would reach human space. Better to stop them now while they were far away. Daehyun opened a secure channel and began typing an encrypted message to Earth Command. He kept it short and clear. He explained the situation, attached all the data, and ended with a simple recommendation. They need help. We should give it. Then he did something that wasn't in the protocol. He sent a message back to the Coalition on the same frequency they had used for their distress call. It was brief, just a few words in Galactic Standard. We hear you. Help is coming. Back in the Coalition Council chamber, a junior technician noticed the response and nearly dropped his datapad. The message had come from Sector 447, a region marked with the highest level warnings, a death world zone that all ships were ordered to avoid. The technician ran to find Velkesh. He found the ambassador in a private chamber looking tired and old despite his species' natural longevity. Ambassador, the technician said, breathing hard. We received a response to the distress call. Velkesh's arms lifted slightly. From whom? Which fleet? That's the thing, sir. It came from Sector 447, the quarantine zone. Velkesh felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close. What did it say? The technician played the message. The voice was strange, using sounds that seemed aggressive compared to Coalition languages. But the translation was clear. Help is coming. Velkesh looked at the sector map. At the region marked in red with warnings about death worlds and hostile environments. Who lives there? He whispered. Who could survive in such a place? He would soon find out. In the depths of space, Earth's military was awakening. Ships that had been hidden for decades were powering up. Soldiers trained in gravity 3 times what Coalition species could tolerate were preparing for deployment. The shadows were moving, and they were coming to help. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Kangdae stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's Pacific Defense Command and read the report for the 3rd time. Around him, holographic displays showed data streaming in from Captain Daehyun's monitoring station. Images of destroyed worlds, Coalition fleet movements, and the biosignature analysis of the Ravager swarm. How long until they reach human space? He asked. Dr. Sung-ho, the chief scientist, pulled up a projection. At their current rate of expansion, 18 months. Maybe 20. But if they consume the Coalition's industrial worlds, they'll have more resources to grow faster. Could be as little as a year. Kangdae was 60 years old and had spent 40 of those years in Earth's military. He had fought in the colony wars, survived the Mars Rebellion, and helped design humanity's deep space defense doctrine. He knew that 18 months wasn't enough time to build a defense that could stop something like the Ravagers. Not on their own. Where is Agent Yuna? He asked. Here, sir. A woman in a dark uniform stepped forward from the back of the room. She had been so quiet that most people hadn't noticed her. That was her job. Yuna worked for Earth's Observation Corps, the intelligence division that had been watching the Galactic Coalition for 70 years. Tell them what we know, Kangdae said. Yuna activated her display. The Galactic Coalition consists of 43 member species spread across approximately 12,000 inhabited worlds. Their combined population is roughly 8 trillion. Their technology is advanced in some areas like medicine and energy generation. But their military capability is extremely limited. Limited how? Asked one of the generals. They evolved on garden worlds, Yuna explained. Low gravity, stable climates, few natural predators. The average Coalition species can tolerate maybe 0.7 Earth gravity maximum. Most prefer 0.4. Their ships are built for comfort, not combat. Their weapons are designed to disable, not destroy, because they've never needed to fight a war of extinction before. She pulled up biological data. Their soldiers are trained to retreat and regroup. They have concepts like acceptable casualties and rules of engagement. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't negotiate, doesn't surrender, and doesn't stop until everything is dead. But we have, Kangdae said quietly. Everyone in the room knew what he meant. Humanity had been fighting for survival since the beginning. Fighting the weather, the diseases, the predators, and each other. Earth had made humanity hard in ways that the peaceful coalition species couldn't understand. "What are our options?" asked General Heo-jin, commander of Earth's Special Operations Division. Kang Dae looked at the faces around him. These were good people, smart people, but he could see the fear in their eyes. Fear of being exposed to the galaxy, fear of being judged for what humanity was. "We activate Shadow Protocol," he said. The room went silent. Shadow Protocol was the contingency plan for galactic-scale threats. It meant revealing humanity to the coalition. It meant war. "The Council will need to vote on this," someone said. "I already spoke with them," Kang Dae replied. The vote was unanimous. "We intervene." Over the next week, Earth transformed from a hidden civilization to a military powerhouse preparing for war. In orbital shipyards above Earth, Mars, and Europa, warships that had been kept in reserve powered up for the first time. These weren't exploration vessels. They were weapons, designed by a species that knew how to kill. Lieutenant Borod trained her Marines in the gravity chambers beneath Seoul Defense Complex. The chamber was set to 3 times Earth's normal gravity, conditions that would crush a coalition soldier flat. Borod's team moved through combat drills carrying full equipment, their enhanced muscles straining but holding. "Remember," she told her squad, "coalition species are fragile. If you grab one too hard, you'll break bones. If you bump into one, you might knock them unconscious. We're going there to protect them, not hurt them, so control your strength." The Marines nodded. They had seen the briefings. They knew that the average coalition citizen was built like a bird compared to a human. Light bones, thin muscles, adapted for easy worlds. In the research division, Dr. Sung-ho worked with his team to develop weapons based on Earth's biology. They created viral agents that would attack Ravager neural tissue. They engineered bacteria that could survive in vacuum and consume organic compounds. They harvested toxins from Earth's most dangerous creatures and modified them for use in space combat. A coalition scientist would have been horrified. To them, biological warfare was taboo, something civilized species didn't do. But humanity had been using biology as a weapon since the first human ancestor used bacteria in rotted meat to poison a predator. It was natural to them. Engineer Taman supervised the loading of Earth's experimental weapons onto the warships. Kinetic cannons that fired metal slugs at relativistic speeds, fusion warheads that could crack a small moon, and his personal favorite, the nanite swarms that could dismantle a ship from the inside out in minutes. "Will this be enough?" his assistant asked. Taman looked at the weapons being loaded, enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Against the Ravagers, probably. Against what comes after. If the coalition decides we're too dangerous, he shrugged. "We'll see." 25 ships assembled in formation beyond Jupiter's orbit. It was a small fleet by coalition standards, but each ship was built by a species that understood war. The ships were armored with composite metals that could withstand radiation and impacts that would vaporize coalition vessels. Their reactors ran hot, pumping out energy levels that would cook any non-human crew. Admiral Kang Dae stood on the bridge of the flagship, a destroyer called the Indomitable. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. These were veterans, people who had been preparing for this moment even if they didn't know it. "All ships report ready, sir," the communications officer said. Kang Dae looked at the strategic display. The route to coalition space would take 6 days at maximum speed. 6 days until humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. 6 days until they found out if the coalition would welcome them or fear them. "Send the message to Captain Dae-hyun," Kang Dae ordered. "Tell him we're coming." At his monitoring station, Dae-hyun received the message and felt relief wash over him. Hae-won read it over his shoulder. "They're really doing it," she said. "They're coming out of hiding." "Yeah," Dae-hyun said. "And I hope the coalition is ready for what they're about to see." He pulled up the tactical data on the Ravager advance. The swarm had just hit the Nexus Gate, a fortified position that the coalition had thought was impenetrable. The defenses were falling. The coalition fleet was in full retreat. Dae-hyun did the math. At current speeds, the human fleet would arrive in 6 days. The Nexus Gate would fall in 4. Thousands of coalition soldiers would die before help arrived. He sent a message to Kang Dae. "You need to go faster." The Admiral's response came back immediately, already pushing the engines to 110%. "We'll be there in 5 days. Tell them to hold on." Across coalition space, the retreat continued. Velkesh watched from the bridge of the Eternal Harmony. the Coalition's flagship, as his forces pulled back from the Nexus Gate. Ships were burning. Escape pods filled space. His people were dying. The Death World signal, he asked a technician. Any updates? Nothing since the first message, Ambassador. Just silence. Velkesh closed his eyes. Maybe the message had been a lie. Maybe whoever lived in that deadly sector was just being cruel. Or maybe they simply didn't care about the problems of civilized species. He didn't know that at that very moment. 25 warships were burning through space at speeds that would have destroyed any Coalition vessel. He didn't know that thousands of soldiers trained in 3 times normal gravity were preparing to fight in conditions that would kill any Coalition Marine. The shadows were coming. And they were coming fast. News of the humans spread through Coalition space like wildfire. At first, it was just rumors. Stories from survivors who spoke of soldiers who could fight in vacuum, who shrugged off wounds that should have been fatal, who moved through toxic environments without protective gear. Many thought these stories were exaggerations born from trauma and fear. Then the videos started circulating, combat footage from the Nexus Gate battle, images of human ships flying through radiation storms, records of humans eating field rations that would poison most Coalition species. The galaxy watched and felt something they hadn't felt in a very long time. Fear. But it wasn't the Ravagers they were suddenly afraid of. In the Coalition Council chambers, Councillor Rixel stood before the Assembly and demanded answers. He was a respected politician from a species known for their logical minds, and right now his logic was telling him that humanity was dangerous. These humans, he said, his voice amplified to reach every representative in the massive chamber, come from a world that should not support intelligent life. They use weapons we have banned for centuries. They treat violence as normal. They are predators and we have invited them into our homes. Velkesh stood to respond. They saved thousands of lives at the Nexus Gate. They came when we called for help, when they could have stayed hidden and safe. For now, Rixel countered. But what happens when the Ravagers are defeated? What happens when these Deathworlders decide they want our resources, our territory? We cannot fight them. Look at the combat data. A single human soldier is worth 10 of ours. Their ships are weapons platforms that make our dreadnoughts look like toys. The chamber fell silent. Everyone had seen the same data. Everyone knew Rixel was right about human military capabilities. The question was whether humans would use that power against them. On Earth, scientist Nayun worked in a biocontainment lab deep beneath Sol. She had been given a sample of Ravager neural tissue from the Nexus Gate battle. Her job was to find a way to kill the Ravagers faster. She looked at the tissue under her microscope and smiled. The Ravagers were tough, yes, but they were still biological, and Earth had taught humanity to be very good at biological warfare. Over the next week, she created 3 different pathogens. The first attacked Ravager neural tissue, causing paralysis. The second interfered with their ability to share information through the hive mind. The third was the most elegant. It made them allergic to the very enzymes they use to digest organic matter. When she presented her work to General Hyojin, the general looked at the data and whistled. You made them allergic to eating? Essentially, yes, Nayun said. Release this into a Ravager bioship and within hours they'll start dying from their own digestive processes. That's brutal. Nayun shrugged. They eat entire worlds. This is mercy compared to what they do. The Coalition liaison officer present at the meeting looked sick. He was a small being, barely a meter tall, from a species that had evolved on a moon with 0.3 gravity. He had been assigned to work with the human military to help coordinate tactics. Your species creates weapons like this casually? He asked. We've been doing it for thousands of years, Hyojin replied. On Earth, everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the diseases, the animals, even the plants. You learn to use every advantage you can find. The liaison couldn't understand it. His world had gentle rains and mild seasons. The most dangerous animal was something that ate flowers. The idea of a planet actively hostile to life was beyond his comprehension. High above Earth's orbit, Captain Wu Jin tested humanity's new strike craft in combat simulations. The fighter was small, fast, and pulled acceleration that would turn a Coalition pilot into paste. Wu Jin flew it through a simulated asteroid field while pulling 12 Gs of force. His body screamed in protest. Even with his enhanced physiology and the pressure suit, 12 Gs was at the edge of human tolerance. But he held the course, threading the needle between asteroids, completing the run in record time. Simulation complete, the AI announced. New record set. Wu Jin climbed out of the cockpit, his legs shaky, his vision spotted. The medical team rushed over to check him, but he waved them off. "I'm fine. Just need water." A Coalition observer watched from the control room. He had seen Coalition's best pilots attempt similar maneuvers in simulation. They blacked out at 4Gs. This human had just done triple that and was asking for water. How? The observer asked the human technician next to him. "We evolved in higher gravity," the technician explained. "Our hearts are stronger. Our blood vessels can handle higher pressure. Our brains are adapted to maintain consciousness during high-G maneuvers. Plus, we've been doing this since we first started flying aircraft back on Earth. That was over 400 years ago for us." The observer did the math. Coalition species had only achieved flight 300 years ago, and they had done it on worlds with lower gravity, where flight was easier. Humans had been flying in Earth's punishing environment for longer than most Coalition species had been spacefaring. In combat zones across Coalition space, human tactics began to change the war. General Hyojin deployed her special forces teams to planets that Coalition Command had already written off as lost. These were worlds where the Ravagers had established strong positions, where the toxic atmosphere and hostile conditions made Coalition rescue operations impossible. The humans went in anyway. On the industrial world of Vex 9, Lieutenant Bora led her squad through a city that had been consumed by the Ravagers. The air was filled with spores that would kill a Coalition soldier in minutes. The temperature was 45 degrees Celsius. Ravager warriors patrolled every street. Bora's squad moved through it like they were on a training exercise. Their armor filtered the toxins. Their enhanced biology handled the heat. They navigated by night vision, moving silently despite their heavy equipment, avoiding Ravager patrols when possible, and eliminating them quickly when not. They found a bunker with 3,000 Coalition civilians hiding inside. The bunker's air supply would run out in 20 hours. Coalition Command had calculated that any rescue attempt would result in more deaths than it would save. Bora looked at the civilians, at the children holding their parents, at the elderly too weak to run. She made a decision. We're getting them out. All of them. It took 18 hours. The humans fought their way through Ravager-infested territory, protecting 3,000 civilians who could barely move in the hostile environment. They carried the wounded, guided the elderly, protected the children. They fought off wave after wave of Ravager warriors. Private Jinsu carried a Coalition child on his back for 8 kilometers. The child's parents had been killed in the initial attack. The child weighed almost nothing to him, but he protected her like she was his own family. When a Ravager warrior tried to attack them, Jinsu put himself between the creature and the child, taking a claw strike across his shoulder that would have torn the child in half. He killed the Ravager with his knife, then kept walking. When the rescue ships finally arrived and Bora's squad loaded the last civilian aboard, the Coalition commanders couldn't believe it. 0 civilian casualties, all 3,000 rescued. The only injuries were to the human soldiers and none of them fatal. How is this possible? Commander Thulvex asked Velkesh as they reviewed the mission data. They're Deathworlders, Velkesh said quietly. He had been studying humans, reading everything Earth had been willing to share about their history and biology. Their world tried to kill them every day for millions of years. They evolved to be unkillable by everything except each other, and even then they're very hard to kill. Thulvex pulled up biological data on humans. What he saw disturbed him. Humans had redundant organs, so if one failed, another could take over. Their bones were so dense they could be used as weapons. Their immune systems were like military forces, attacking any foreign organism with overwhelming aggression. They could survive for weeks without food, days without water. They could heal from injuries that would be permanent for Coalition species. And they use all of this to protect others, Thulvex said. Why? I don't know, Velkesh admitted. Perhaps because their world was so hostile, they learned that cooperation was the only way to survive. Or perhaps they're simply better than we feared they would be. But not everyone in the Coalition felt that way. Councillor Rixall continued to push for limits on human military access. He argued that after the war, humanity should return to their quarantine zone. He gathered support from representatives who were frightened by human capabilities. In a private meeting, he confronted Velkesh directly. You're being naive, Ambassador. These humans are predators. They see violence as normal. Look at their entertainment. They have entire industries built around fictional violence. They teach their children to fight before they teach them mathematics. They also teach their children to protect the weak, Velkesh countered. Every human soldier I've met has put Coalition lives before their own. They don't have to be here, counselor. They chose to help, for now. But what happens when they decide we're in their way? Velkesh had no answer for that. He could only hope that humanity's choice to help revealed their true nature, that they were protectors, not conquerors. The War Council met aboard the Eternal Harmony to plan the final offensive. Admiral Kangde stood before a holographic display showing the Ravager home cluster, a region of space that contained 17 star systems all infested with Ravager bioships. At the center was the Prime World, where the Queen resided. You want to attack the heart of their territory, Commander Thulvek said, his crystalline body flickering with uncertainty. That's suicide. They have thousands of bioships defending that cluster. Yes, Kangde agreed calmly, which is why we're going to do it. The Coalition commanders looked at each other with confusion. Velkesh stepped forward. Admiral, perhaps you should explain your reasoning. In Coalition military doctrine, we avoid heavily defended positions when possible. That's why you've been losing, Kangde said without malice. The Ravagers are a hive mind. Kill the Queen and the entire swarm dies. We've studied their biology with scientist Nayun's help. The Queen is the central nervous system. Without her, the warriors are just animals with no direction. But getting to her through all those defenses, Thulvex trailed off. Will be hard, Kangde finished. That's why we brought friends. He activated a second display. It showed an additional 75 human warships emerging from hyperspace. Earth had committed its full military strength to this operation. Every ship they had, every soldier, every weapon. The entire human fleet, Velkesh breathed. You're risking everything. If we don't end this now, the Ravagers will keep spreading, Kangde said. They'll reach human space eventually. Better to stop them here while we have allies and momentum. The vote was taken. The Coalition fleet would join the human assault on the Ravager Prime World. It would be the largest military operation in galactic history. Over the next week, the combined fleet assembled. Coalition ships numbering in the thousands, human ships numbering in the hundreds. On paper, the Coalition fleet was larger, but everyone knew that the human ships carried far more firepower per vessel. General Hyojin briefed the ground assault teams. Her plan was insane by Coalition standards. They would deploy directly onto the Prime World's surface, fight their way through Ravager territory to the Queen's chamber, and eliminate her. It was a suicide mission by any reasonable military calculation. The humans volunteered immediately. Every single one. Lieutenant Bora stood before her squad one last time. They had been through so much together. The Nexus Gate, Vex 9, a dozen other battles. Some of them had injuries that hadn't fully healed. All of them were exhausted. None of them hesitated. This is it, she told them. Everything we've trained for. Everything we've fought for. We end this today. Private Jinsu checked his weapon one last time. He thought about the Coalition child he had rescued on Vex 9. She was safe now, with foster parents on a protected world. He had received a message from her. Just 3 words in broken galactic standard. Thank you, human. He would fight for her. For all the innocent people the Ravagers had killed and would kill if this mission failed. The fleet jumped into the Ravager home cluster and immediately came under attack. Thousands of bioships swarmed toward them, blotting out the stars. The Coalition fleet opened fire with traditional weapons, focusing on defensive positions. The human fleet deployed Na'un's biological weapons. Viral torpedoes streaked through space, infecting bioships with engineered diseases. The Ravagers began dying before they could even reach firing range. Entire formations of bioships convulsed and went dark as the pathogens consumed them from within. Captain Wu Jin led a squadron of strike fighters into the heart of the enemy formation. They flew through debris fields and radiation storms, pulling maneuvers that would have torn Coalition fighters apart. Their mission was to clear a path for the troop transports. He spotted a cluster of bioships forming a defensive wall and armed his weapons. All fighters, follow me in. Make them regret waking up this morning. His squadron dove into the enemy formation, their kinetic weapons ripping through organic armor. Wu Jin personally destroyed 8 bioships in the first pass, his reflexes and enhanced biology allowing him to process battlefield information faster than any Coalition pilot could. A Ravager bioship tried to ram him. He rolled his fighter 90 degrees, pulled 12 Gs, and came up behind it. One missile later, the bioship was debris. On the ground assault transports, the Marines prepared for landing. The prime world's atmosphere was toxic. The temperature extreme, the gravity nearly twice Earth standard. Coalition soldiers would need full environmental suits just to survive. The humans wore basic armor and breathing masks. Bora's transport punched through the atmosphere under heavy fire. The pilot, a veteran named Taman, flew like he was personally offended by the Ravager point defense fire. He dodged, weaved, and brought them down hard but intact. The ramp dropped and Bora's squad charged into hell. The Ravager prime world was a nightmare landscape of organic structures and pulsing biomass. Warriors swarmed from every direction. The humans met them with violence that matched the Ravager's own. Jinsu found himself fighting alongside coalition soldiers who had volunteered for the ground assault despite the danger. He watched them struggle in the heavy gravity, saw them fall from wounds that he could shrug off. He positioned himself to protect them, taking hits meant for his more fragile allies. A coalition soldier next to him took a claw strike and went down. Jinsu killed the Ravager, then picked up the soldier and carried him while still fighting. The soldier weighed almost nothing to him, but to that soldier, Jinsu was saving his life. They fought for hours, pushing through Ravager territory toward the Queen's chamber. The human biological weapons were working. Ravager warriors were getting sick, their movements sluggish, their attacks uncoordinated. But there were still so many of them. Captain Dae-hyun led a technical team that had landed with the ground forces. Their job was to set up signal jammers that would prevent the Queen from calling for reinforcements. He worked frantically while Dr. Haewon provided covering fire with a rifle she barely knew how to use. "Almost done," Dae-hyun said as plasma fire scorched the wall next to his head. "Just need another minute." "We might not have a minute," Haewon replied, shooting at approaching Ravagers. A massive warrior form broke through their perimeter. It was 3 times the size of a normal Ravager, covered in thick armor. Haewon's rifle wouldn't even scratch it. Then Private Jinsu appeared, literally throwing himself between them and the creature. He hit it with enough force to crack its armor, then drove his combat knife into the gap. The creature screamed and thrashed, but Jinsu held on, twisting the blade until it went still. "Jammers active," Dae-hyun announced. "The Queen is isolated." Admiral Kang Dae watched the battle from orbit and made the hardest call of his career. The ground forces were being overwhelmed. They needed support. He ordered the fleet to begin orbital bombardment around the human positions, knowing that the margin of error was razor thin. Coalition commanders protested. The bombardment would kill their own troops, but Kang Dae had faith in human durability. The bombardment began. Fusion warheads detonated across the prime world's surface, vaporizing Ravager formations. The humans on the ground felt the heat, the shock waves, the radiation. It hurt, but they survived. The Ravagers died by the thousands. With the path cleared, Bora's squad reached the Queen's chamber. It was a massive organic cavern pulsing with biomass. At the center sat the Ravager Queen, a creature the size of a building, connected to the entire swarm through biological neural networks. The Queen knew they were coming. She sent her royal guard, the largest and most dangerous Ravager warriors. Bora's squad met them head-on. The fight was brutal. Marines fell with injuries that even human biology couldn't overcome. But they held the line. They pushed forward meter by meter, protecting each other, covering each other's weaknesses. Jinsu took a hit that shattered 3 ribs. He kept fighting. Another Marine lost an arm to a claw strike. She switched to her pistol and kept shooting. They were beaten, bloody, exhausted, but they didn't stop. Bora reached the Queen with 2 Marines and Captain Dae-hyun, who had fought his way through with his technical team. The Queen was massive, ancient, the mother of billions of Ravagers. She looked at them with compound eyes that showed something that might have been fear. "For everyone you killed," Bora said, and activated the biological weapon Na-won had designed specifically for the Queen. The pathogen spread through the Queen's body in seconds. Her connection to the swarm disrupted, then severed. Across the galaxy, Ravager warriors stopped moving. The hive mind collapsed. The war was over. The aftermath took weeks to process. The Ravager bioships drifted in space, dead and inert. The prime world went silent. The Coalition had won, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of Coalition soldiers dead, dozens of human Marines killed or wounded. The Coalition Council met again to decide humanity's fate. Counselor Rixall stood before the assembly, his argument prepared. Humans were too dangerous. They should return to their quarantine zone. They should be monitored, restricted, controlled. But before he could speak, Velkesh played a video. It showed Private Jinsu carrying a wounded Coalition soldier through enemy fire. It showed human Marines protecting Coalition civilians with their own bodies. The Nexus Gate was burning. Velkesh watched from the Eternal Harmony as 3 more Coalition destroyers exploded under the Ravager assault. The gate itself, a massive defensive station that had protected this sector for 200 years, was covered in Ravager bioships. They clung to it like parasites, eating through the hull, consuming everything inside. All ships fall back to defensive line Gamma, Commander Thulvex ordered. His crystalline body was flickering rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme stress. We cannot hold this position. Velkesh wanted to argue, to demand they stand and fight, but he knew it would be suicide. The Ravagers had brought more bioships than they had anticipated. Hundreds of them, each one filled with thousands of warrior forms. "Sir, detecting hyperspace signatures," a sensor operator called out. "Multiple contacts inbound." Thulvex's body flashed red with anger. "More Ravagers. How many?" 25. "No, wait." The operator looked confused. "These aren't Ravager signatures. I've never seen power readings like this. They're off the scale." "Show me," Velkesh demanded. The tactical display updated. 25 ships were dropping out of hyperspace dangerously close to the battlefield. No Coalition captain would risk an emergence that close to a combat zone. The gravitational interference alone could tear a ship apart. But these ships emerged perfectly, falling into formation like they had done this 1,000 times before. "What are those?" Thulvex whispered. The ships were like nothing in the Coalition database. They were angular, aggressive, built for function over comfort. Their hulls were dark and covered in weapons. Energy signatures showed reactors running at temperatures that would cook any Coalition crew alive. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer said. "It's on our emergency frequencies." "Put it through," Velkesh ordered. A voice came through the speakers, speaking Galactic Standard with a strange accent that made the words sound sharp and aggressive. "Coalition forces, this is Admiral Kang Day of the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Where do you need us?" "Earth." The word meant nothing to Velkesh. He had never heard of it. "Who are you?" he asked. "What species?" "We're human," Kang Day replied. "And we're here to help. Now where do you need us?" Thulvex pushed forward. "The Nexus Gate is overrun with Ravager bioships. We've lost most of our assault fleet. If you truly want to help stop them from destroying that station." "Understood. Beginning our attack run." The human fleet moved, and Velkesh felt his breath catch. They accelerated at rates that should have crushed any crew. They flew straight into radiation fields that would kill Coalition personnel in seconds. They didn't slow down or take evasive action. They simply charged forward like apex predators who had never learned fear. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kang Day watched the tactical display with calm eyes. The Ravager bioships were organic vessels, grown rather than built, covered in thick armor that regenerated over time. Coalition weapons had been bouncing off them for weeks. "Weapons free," he ordered. "Show them what Earth brings to a fight." The human ships opened fire. Kinetic cannons launched metal slugs at incredible speeds. The rounds punched through Ravager armor like paper, continuing through the bioship and out the other side. Fusion missiles detonated against clusters of bioships, the heat vaporizing organic tissue instantly. But the most effective weapon was something the Coalition had never seen: viral torpedoes. The humans fired them into damaged bioships, and within minutes the Ravager vessels began to convulse and die as engineered diseases consumed them from within. "They're using biological warfare," a Coalition officer said, his voice filled with shock. Velkesh watched in horrified fascination. Biological weapons were illegal under Coalition law. They were considered barbaric, uncivilized. But as he watched, 3 Ravager hive ships dissolve into clouds of dead tissue. He couldn't deny their effectiveness. Lieutenant Bora stood in the troop bay of her assault shuttle, checking her squad's equipment one last time. They were about to do something insane, even by human standards. "Listen up," she told her Marines. "We're boarding a Ravager bioship to rescue Coalition personnel trapped inside. The environment will be hostile. Toxic atmosphere, high radiation, and about 1,000 Ravager warriors between us and the survivors. Standard Tuesday for us." The Marines laughed. They had trained for this. Humans had evolved to be persistence, hunters to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. A few hundred meters of hostile alien ship didn't scare them. The shuttle punched through the bioship's hull, and Bo-Ra's squad charged out into the nightmare inside. The Ravager warriors were large, covered in natural armor, with claws that could tear through steel. They attacked immediately. Bo-Ra shot the first one in what passed for its head, then used her enhanced strength to throw another into a wall hard enough to crack its exoskeleton. Her squad moved with practiced efficiency, covering each other, advancing through corridors filled with toxic spores and biological weapons that would have killed Coalition soldiers instantly. Their armor's filtration systems handled the toxins. Their enhanced immune systems fought off the biological agents. They pressed forward. Private Jinsu was young. This was his first real combat, but his training took over. When a Ravager warrior charged him, he didn't freeze. He stepped forward and drove his combat knife into its thorax, then yanked it sideways. The creature died before it hit the ground. 17 more came at him in the next corridor. He killed them all. Aboard the Eternal Harmony, healer Kinara watched the human assault on her medical bay's sensors. She was a peaceful being, a doctor who had spent her life helping others. What she was seeing made no sense to her. "They're fighting in vacuum," she said to her assistant. "Some of them have hull breaches in their armor. They should be dead." But they weren't dead. The humans kept fighting with injuries that would have killed any Coalition soldier 3 times over. She watched one human Marine get slashed across the chest by a Ravager claw. The armor parted, and she could see the wound. But the human just slapped a medical patch on it and kept fighting. "Bring up the biological data on these humans," she ordered. When the data appeared, Chinara felt faint. Humans had redundant organs. Their bones were dense enough to be used as armor. Their immune systems were so aggressive they could fight off infections that would kill her species in hours. Their muscles could function at temperatures that would cause Coalition muscle tissue to break down. "What kind of world creates something like this?" she whispered. Her assistant pulled up the data on Earth. What appeared made both of them go silent. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Gravity 1.3 times the galactic standard. Radiation levels that would require Coalition species to wear protective gear 24/7. Weather systems so violent they could level cities. And most terrifying of all, it was covered in predator species that hunted each other constantly. Humans hadn't just survived on this world. They had thrived. They had become the apex predator of a planet that was actively trying to kill them. Bo-Ra's squad found the Coalition survivors huddled in a sealed compartment. There were 30 of them, various species, all terrified. When the humans broke through the door, the aliens screamed, thinking the Ravagers had found them. "Easy," Bo-Ra said, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "We're here to help. We're getting you out." One of the Coalition soldiers stared at her. "You walked here from the shuttle bay. That's 1,500 meters through Ravager territory." "Yes," Bo-Ra said simply. "But how? We barely survived 500 meters before we had to seal ourselves in here." Bo-Ra didn't know how to explain that for humans. This was just another day. That every human child grew up on a world that made this bioship look safe by comparison. "Come on," she said instead. "Stay close to us. We'll handle the Ravagers." The evacuation was brutal. The humans fought their way back through the bioship, protecting the fragile Coalition personnel. Jinsu carried 2 injured aliens, 1 in each arm, while still managing to shoot Ravagers with his pistol. Another, Marine, took a hit meant for a Coalition soldier and just kept going, blood leaking from her armor but her aim steady. When they finally made it back to the shuttle, the Coalition survivors were in shock. They had just watched humans do the impossible, fight in conditions that should have killed them, survive wounds that were fatal, and protect strangers without hesitation. On the Eternal Harmony, Velkesh finally got his meeting with Admiral Kangde. It was a video call, both of them on their respective bridges. Velkesh looked at the human and tried to understand what he was seeing. Kangde was old by human standards, his hair gray, his face lined with age. But he stood in full gravity without support. During the conversation, he casually caught a data pad that one of his officers dropped. The pad weighed 5 kilograms. He caught it one-handed while drinking coffee with the other hand, didn't even look at it. Velkesh realized with growing horror that this human was operating in gravity 3 times what Velkesh could tolerate, and he was doing it casually, like it was nothing. "Thank you for coming," Velkesh said carefully. "You saved thousands of lives today." "We're just getting started," Kangde replied. "We've analyzed the Ravager tactics and biology. We have strategies to counter them, but we'll need your fleet to work with us." "Of course,"